Hi, I'm Bill Dillane. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to talk about a book by a local author who is a professor at Albertus Magnus College in New Haven. My guest is Dr. Norm Davis.
Norm, Bill, it's my pleasure to be here today.
Glad to have you back here. And the name of your book is The Black Quarterback Syndrome: How to Succeed as a First or Pioneer in an Organization. I forgot to mention that Norm is a management professor, and you are a management consultant specializing in workplace diversity,
That's
right?
correct. That's correct.
And if we can show the book is called The Black Quarterback Syndrome: How to Succeed as a First or Pioneer in an Organization. And we're going to show the book cover right here. And it's an interesting book cover. If you could take off the bottom slides while we're talking about these pictures. There we are. Fun question I'm going to ask you first. Why do you have three people in suits out on the football field?
Well, I wanted to blend the athletic part of it with the business part of it because it's really a business book. It's a management book. It's a book for employees to refer to. And
it's been helpful to me, yes, as a person who works in a project management environment. Go ahead.
And you will notice that the person who is in the position of quarterback, well, she's not black, nor is she a quarterback, and she has a business suit on. And in fact, she's wearing high-heel shoes. And the idea is to represent her as a business person, which she in fact is. She's the athletic director at my college.
Oh, she's the athletic director. Okay. There we are. Yeah, I've never heard of a woman athletic director before, and I'm not that much into sports. I follow UConn, and I didn't even know who their athletic director was until I got interested in UConn basketball.
There aren't that many. In fact, I interviewed one who was the first female athletic director at the University of Texas, a very big school down in Austin.
And the two men between her are do they work or teach at Albertus Magnus College?
Well, it happens that one is the director of finance, and the other one was a graduating senior, a major in information technology. But they are playing supporting roles to the person who is the quarterback, and the quarterback, of course, as you well know, is the leader of the football team.
So you're also talking about pioneers and observers.
That's
and
right.
People who support pioneers.
Exactly.
And you also said the black quarterback syndrome. That is a metaphor. Am I correct? Can you explain the metaphor?
Yes, it is. Many times, well, I'll put it this way. In the past, many years ago, in the 60s, 70s, and some might argue that it still exists today, the thinking was that a black person could not be a quarterback, the leader of a team. Now, in the 60s and the 70s, there were parts of the country where, as a matter of practice, there were not black quarterbacks on teams. In fact, there may not have even been black players. But as black players began to be integrated into football in colleges, black quarterbacks were still absent. And of course, what we see here is that the leaders of the team, or the person that had to do all the calling of the signals, the reading of the plays, the leader of the team, it was questionable as to whether or not white players in the South would follow a black quarterback. And then there were unspoken doubts from many people as to whether or not a black person was smart enough to be a quarterback, which when I look back on it, it's absurd. I mean, there's many intelligent black people as I knew in high school and college and so forth. It's interesting that was the case.
Does the idea of the black quarterback syndrome still exist today, 46 years after the signing of the Civil Rights Act of 1964?
In business, I think it does, because there are people who find themselves to be the first, and by the way, to be in what I call the black quarterback syndrome, you do not have to be black. As you pointed out there, it is a metaphor. And in athletics, it was only a few years ago that Rush Limbaugh said that he didn't think Donovan McNabb was a good employee. You can tell I'm a management professor, that he was a good quarterback.
Right.
He said they just needed to have a black quarterback to give him recognition and so forth. So I think there are a number of outspokens, undiscussables about blacks being the leaders. And so that's what I hope to bring to the attention of my book.
I'd like to show a couple of other pictures before we talk a little bit about a little more about the book, and we could talk about the book as we show the pictures. Now, the next picture, you wrote this book because of Marlon Briscoe. He was the first, I don't know sports, he was the first black quarterback, am I correct, in the NFL?
Almost. He was the first starting black quarterback. There was another person, his name was Willie Thrower, who was the first black quarterback. He came in just for a few plays and never played quarterback again. And in fact, Marlon in 1968 was the seventh quarterback that he was on the depth chart. He was not number 1, 2, or 3, or 5, 4, 5, 6, or 7. He was the seventh, the last quarterback. And when the other ones got traded or hurt, finally they put Marlon into a game, and he did exceptionally well, and therefore he played I believe he played the rest of that season.
Did you write your book because of Marlon Briscoe's book, The Black Quarterback?
Well, I read Marlon's book, and after I read it, it occurred to me that I see the same kinds of things in organizations. Marlon talked in his book about the challenges that he faced to become the first black quarterback, or to be a quarterback. When he was in the little leagues of football, I think they call it Pop Warner.
Pop Warner, yes.
He would go to tryouts, and they would always put him in the line, not for the quarterbacks. They told him to move from the quarterback line to the running back line, or to the pass receiving line. See, they were nudging him away from being the quarterback, or nudging him away from being the leader, quite frankly, directing him away from being the leader. But he was very passionate about his desire to be a quarterback, and therefore he stayed and eventually became a quarterback at the college that I went to. And that's where I met Marlon. After reading Marlon's book, I invited him to Albertus, and he spoke about his book.
Yes.
And as I was listening to his book, listening to him talk about the book, I thought, this is amazing. I was already writing another book, but when I heard him talk about this, I thought, I'm going to stop writing that book and switch and begin writing this book, because I don't think it will take quite as much research as it was taking for me to pursue my other book.
And you did quite a bit of researching for this book with surveys, and we can get into that in a minute. I did some,
yes.
I want to show the rest of the pictures. Some of them are in the book, and there we are. That's you with Marlon Briscoe.
That's right. That's when he came to Albertus in 2004. And I believe that was either before or after we both spoke. He talked about his being the first starting black quarterback, and I talked about what I had dubbed the black quarterback syndrome, my metaphor for the fact that if you are a first, you also face the extra challenges and pressures that Marlon faced when he became the first starting black quarterback in the entire National Football League. You can only imagine the pressure. I mean, there's one thing to be in a pressure situation when you've got guys that weigh 250 to 300 pounds chasing you. But there's another thing when you're conscious of the fact that you are making history.
I want to segue into the next picture. I hope it's the picture that I'm thinking about. We're talking about teammates. Here's Marlon Briscoe again. This was when he was a pro football player.
That's correct. He was at Denver at this point in time.
Okay. Next picture, please. Let's talk about teammates. This is a statue. You have a picture like this in your book. And please explain the statue. Okay,
that's Jackie Robinson on the right and Pee Wee Reese on the left. As most people know, Jackie Robinson was the first black Major League Baseball player to make it into the pros. And he met with a lot of resistance from the fans. He even met with resistance from the Brooklyn fans and even his own teammates. It's kind of hard to imagine that, isn't it? But even the Brooklyn teammates, some of them did not want him to be on the team. But the shortstop, his name was Pee Wee Reese. He was a Southerner, white from Kentucky, I believe it was. During one particular game, when Jackie was being heckled and so forth and feeling a lot of pressure, Pee Wee walked over to him and he put his arms around Jackie.
As we see in the picture.
Exactly. And that became a turning point, quite frankly, in the acceptance of Jackie Robinson in Brooklyn and around the Major League Baseball. Slowly, of course. I mean, it wasn't like turning a light switch on. But that is why I put that in my book. And I highlight in my book in periodic places the role of what I call supporters, onlookers, people who are watching the first person try to succeed. It might be the first woman in the law department as a lawyer, as a partner, or as a lawyer in the law department. And there might be 45 guys who are lawyers. And she will probably feel some extra pressure, although she probably won't admit to that extra pressure, because she wants to be known for her abilities and not because she's the first woman. So I talk about the role of onlookers. And so rather than have people sit back and wonder if the pioneer will sink or swim, why not reach a hand out to the pioneer or throw the pioneer a ring or something to help support them, because you're all on the same team. All on the same team. It makes no sense for those teammates in Brooklyn to have not been supporting Jackie Robinson. Think about that.
Well, today, wouldn't you have in business, and I work for a company, I won't speak for the company publicly because I don't, but I work for a company that has done a lot of diversity training, diversity workshops, and I just assume other businesses today do the same thing.
Many companies have spent millions of dollars, but I personally think that this concept of firstness has been ignored. And in fact, companies are still working at what we call diversity, managing and valuing diversity. I think companies are still working very hard to improve in their abilities to do that. But I think very often, if a person is competent and gets hired, sometimes from that point on, once they are hired, the other needs and support may not even be offered to that person. But in fact, I think it's a mistake not to do so. We have mentors and we have sponsors in organizations, but that is people who support employees because they have a great amount of potential. So why not make sure that first or pioneers are supported? Because there's like what I call a gravity that pulls at them, and many of them will not admit it. You just don't want to admit it. For example, Kathleen Bigelow was just a couple of weeks ago given an Oscar for the movie Hurt Locker. She was the first female director to ever win an Academy Award. And she got criticism because she didn't, in her acceptance speech, she didn't acknowledge that she was the first, that she was making history. She didn't do any of that. And why didn't she do that? Because she wanted to be known as a good director. And so it gets fairly complex. When you ask people about the pressure you might feel as a first or pioneer, very often they will deny it and just say, oh no, I don't feel any particular pressure. And if you talk to the onlookers about the fact that this person who was a pioneer could use some support because they are a first, or did you notice that they were a first or a pioneer? Let's go back to the woman who is among 45 men in the law department. If you ask those guys, many of them will say, oh no, we treat her the same. In fact, we never noticed that she was a woman. And you know that that's not that's not the case. But they might say that. Very often we do say things like that. If you were in the majority.
What is proper in the workplace for both the pioneer and the observer? Let's start with the pioneer. What does the pioneer have to do in order to get over the fear of being a pioneer and getting the work done and working in the organization?
Well, the first thing they have to do is to be competent. They have to be very competent. And they have to believe in themselves. What I suggested in my book is that they begin by having a plan when they begin this new position that they're in.
The 90-day plan you talked about?
I call it a 90-day plan, exactly. Just 3 months. Immediately begin to identify what are the expectations and the objectives of this position. What does my boss expect from me? What do my collaterals expect from me? What do my peers expect? And even the subordinates. So you begin with this plan, and then as you begin to implement the plan, you actually refer to the successes along the way. Let people know that you, in fact, are meeting the objectives of the plan, and we don't want to be boastful, but we do want people to know that you're succeeding. You want your superior to know that you're succeeding. You want others in the organization to know that you are succeeding. You want to have support. You want to get to know important people around the organization. You want to self-assess. That is, constantly be modifying your own behavior to fit in with the culture that's within the organization. For example, if you were to go to a meeting and you got to the meeting right on time and your boss gave you a strange look for getting there right on time or a little late, if you're correctly self-assessing, you'll figure out that your boss wants you to be there not right on time or a minute late, but early.
Okay.
So the next time you get there early, self-assessing. And to keep your eyes open, keep looking around and so forth. And I go in much greater detail in my book. I mean, there are actually 12 different steps that, and by the way, I should make this point. I think that anyone who uses these 12 steps, it'll increases their chances for success and succeeding. But I named my book The Black Quarterback Syndrome because, I wanted to make sure that I was talking strongly to this particular group of people that I felt and still believe have been overlooked, and those are pioneers. And again, I make the point that you don't have to be black, you don't have to be a minority group member. You could be the first person that does the weather from a wheelchair.
Okay.
I think that's possible, but I've never seen it. I predict that one day that's going to happen. And that person will probably feel some extra pressure. They'll probably deny the extra pressure. The people working with them might deny the extra pressure. But if they've read my book, they'll understand and know that internally that person is going to probably feel the extra pressure. I was just thinking about the word internalized oppression, which is a psychological term, and what it means is taking in many of the stereotypes and concerns that people might have about you because you are a first, and you internalize that to such a great extent that it actually holds you down. And it's not an external barrier, it's an internal barrier that you, in fact, are putting on yourself psychologically. And I think many times that first and pioneers do experience internalized oppression. They hold themselves down.
Is a support group good within a company? Some companies do have support groups.
Yes, they do. They have such groups as support groups, and where people can voluntarily go there. Depending upon the level that you're at, you're not going to find managers and directors and vice presidents who might be first or pioneers joining such groups. So I think it becomes particularly important that those people, for example, read my book and have people to talk to, people that they can trust, and get to know the environment, the culture, and so forth. But I do think support groups are helpful. In fact, early in my career, when I was not a teacher but working in organizations, I felt very ambivalent about having women's groups, and the Latino group or the gay and lesbian group or the African American or black group and so forth. But I saw that the progress was occurring so slowly, I began to really believe that support groups have made a big difference. And in fact, I think it's also good that you invite everyone to be a member and go to the support group. For example, if you're straight, I think it's nice to have an open invitation to the gay and lesbian and bisexual group, for example. So the straight people can go. They can learn, and they can teach the people who are gay, and the gay people can teach the people who are straight. This is what we call a learning organization. I
learned something like that in a course I'll mention in a minute. My guest is Dr. Norm Davis. Dr. Davis is a management professor at Albertus Magnus College here in New Haven, and he has a new book called The Black Quarterback Syndrome: How to Succeed as a First or Pioneer in an Organization. And your website is theblackquarterbacksyndrome.com, or if you don't want to spell it out the long way, drnormdavis.com, as in drnormdavis.com. And we're showing the websites at the bottom of the screen. I was in a project management seminar a couple of years ago where somebody said, have a workshop where you have people on the team who are from different cultures and have everyone talk about a favorite holiday within their culture. If I were to do that personally, because I am so far removed from ancestry, I would have to talk about an American holiday. That would be me, because I do not have
Thanksgiving, huh?
a big Thanksgiving, or I would think of 4th of July, but I don't have a major ancestry. I did not grow up with grandparents from another country, so I don't have that type of heritage. But that was an interesting point, and it sort of goes in with what you said about inviting white people into a black group or straight people into a gay and lesbian group, and everybody talk about their experiences.
Wednesday is St. Patrick's Day.
We're taping this in March rather. Go ahead.
Okay.
That's okay. This coming
right.
Wednesday is St. Patrick's Day. That's okay.
Every day is St. Patrick's Day,
Right.
just as every day is Columbus
Right.
Day and African American History Day and so forth, which it should be.
Yes.
All of these things. But I will probably wear green that day, so a green tie or something.
And Friday is St. Joseph's Day.
Okay.
Okay. Hi, Raylene, in case you're watching.
That's right.
Right. And you're going to be a guest on her show on
March 28th. That's
on
right.
WNHU. You're doing a book signing.
Yes, I am. My book signing is going to be at the Milford Mall at Borders bookstore, and that's going to be April 17th, 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
All righty, in the year 2010.
2010, that's right.
I get lazy and
You're
I keep
invited.
showing these. I will show up. Yeah, I will be there. I get lazy and I show these shows over and over again.
Makes sense to me.
But again, if you can't make it to the book signing, or if it has happened already, drnormdavis.com, drnormdavis.com, or theblackquarterbacksyndrome.com.
That's right.
You've talked about pioneers and you talk about observers. What is the role of an observer, or in my case, as a white male in a diverse business organization, what are my responsibilities?
Excellent question. And maybe the place to start is that it's beneficial for this person that is new in that particular position, and it's also good for the organization if we can have assurances that this person is going to succeed. And another metaphor, I like to use metaphors, rather than throwing a person out there in the swimming pool, let's stand and just watching them and stand back and let's see if they can sink or swim. Let's see what they're going to do. They're supposed to be so good. We went out and brought this person in from California or Chicago. The first woman, the first minority group member, the first handicapped person. Let's see how good they really are. Rather than doing that, you're supportive of that person. You get to know that person. If you really care, and I think that's the key point here, is when you know that there is a benefit for supporting that person, I think that you will get to know that person. You share information with that person. You may know about other jobs that person might be interested in as the years go by. You certainly don't want to steer someone out of a new position in a matter of months. But you get to know them in a way as you would any other person that you like. Hopefully there are common points between the two of you. Maybe you both like to play tennis. I used to be a tennis player when the knees were better, and I met lots of people playing tennis and got to know a lot of people playing tennis. Golf, of course, is the perfect game for developing such relationships because things move much more slowly and you have time to talk in between. That is, if you're not losing money to the other person you're playing. I hear people bet when they play golf. I
don't play golf, but I do eat. How about parties? How about
parties?
lunches?
In my book, I even talk about the role of being social. Go to social events. When you and your spouse are invited to the holiday parties or other parties, even though the spouse may not want to go, encourage the spouse to go with you anyway, because when you go, you learn things. And in fact, those people that do go, and when you don't go, those people that go are slightly getting ahead of you. In the book, I even talk about having cocktail parties And I even go so far as to, I believe, give websites that you can go to see how to plan a party. Make sure your party is enjoyable. Parties, you want your party to start like a curve, okay? Start at this point and continually go up. Mm-hmm. And you don't want it to end down here, because people tend to remember the very end of the party. And if it ends down low, then they remember the party as being slow, dull, and so forth. Uh-huh. But there's a plethora of party games on the internet that you can build in. And make sure that, and I talk more specifically about having parties. How do you do a party? What kind of food to have? Monitor the alcohol. You don't want anyone to leave your party and get into an accident. Mm-hmm. In today's litigious society, you'll be sued by the spouse of the person that had the accident.
We have only a couple minutes left. You interviewed about 30 people.
20
people. What did you learn from these people?
Well, I learned that if you are talking one-on-one with people who in fact are pioneers or first, pretty much all of them have experienced what I've called the black quarterback syndrome. Mm-hmm. That is, these additional pressures, these additional challenges, the feeling that I should deny that there are such things because I don't want anyone to think that I'm using my uniqueness as an excuse for not performing. But I believe that anyone who, when you move into a position that's always been held by a man, or always been held by a woman, or always been held by a person who's white, or always been held by someone who's young and you're older, or always been held by a black person and you're white or you're Latino, there is that possibility. In fact, it's a rather prevalent possibility that you're going to feel extra pressure. Not through design of the majority, but it's just, we've never seen a female CPA before. We've never seen a male nurse before, and so forth. We've never seen a young person at MTV, an older person, a 55 or 65-year-old person at MTV. We've just never had that. I interviewed a white male who was a manager in a financial organization, and at 26, 27, he became a manager. Mm-hmm. He was the youngest in the organization, and he experienced the black quarterback syndrome. Many of the people didn't listen to him. They thought he was green, thought that he didn't fit in, thought that how on earth could you have achieved such success? Mm-hmm. I'll turn it back for you for one last question.
Okay.
Turn the table.
I have just enough time to say thank you, Dr. Norm Davis. Thank you very much, Norm, for being on with me. Dr. Norm Davis.
My pleasure to be here.
He is a management professor at Albertus Magnus College, and his book is The Black Quarterback Syndrome: How to Succeed as a First or Pioneer in an Organization.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for watching, everyone.